They always open their eyes right before the floor lets go. You can hog-tie a halo with iron. Slag iron is best, the ugly kind with glass bubbles trapped in it. You can cross-hatch salt along the rafters and paint the joists with ash and boiler soot. You can weld a hand winch to a beam that probably shouldn't hold your weight, much less the weight of whatever lives above clouds. You can do all of that in quiet. But when you cut the seam, the house knows. The basement under 17th Street had a smell that's hard to explain if you've never cleaned flood mud off your own walls. Damp plaster and mouse nests, old pennies. A cheap space heater ticked to itself like it was afraid of the dark. My gloves were already slick. The chain across the angel's torso steamed where it touched. Slag iron does that near grace, sweats like it's alive and trying to be brave. "Don't speak," I said, because I was talking to myself, not to it. "You never answer them. You never ask questions. You pull." I cranked the winch. The beam creaked loud. The angel's eyelids twitched. The face, if I can use that word for something cut with geometry we don't have, didn't look much like a baby in a painting. More like a person drawn from memory by someone who'd only ever met reflections. Too smooth, too certain. You can't hate a face like that. You can only endure it. The seam cut snaked across the concrete like a hairline crack on a windshield. Nothing at first, then everything. Warm air sank. Cold air rose. A draft pulled at my collar from the wrong direction. The house shifted on its bones, which is what a house does when it wants to leave. "Work words," I said, and I didn't realize I'd said them out loud until the angel flinched. The old syllables aren't Latin and aren't safe. The first time I learned them, I bled out of my ears for an hour. Now they sit in me like a second jaw. The winch handle bucked. I set my boots against that ruined concrete, leaned back and dragged. Every inch felt like hauling an engine block uphill with my teeth. The chain hissed where it crossed the angel's ribs. The air went sweet and wrong, like fruit left above a radiator all winter, sugared rot wrapped in a church bulletin. It made a sound I've learned to fear more than anything. The sound of permission denied. Not words, not music, just the physics of a request refused. It shook my fingers to the knuckles. If you let that sound into your head, you start thinking maybe you're the villain here. That's the trap. Doubt is a better blade than anything heaven sends. "Keep your mouth shut," I told my doubt and pulled. The seam split an inch. Dust fell from the beam on my cheeks. My hand slipped. I wiped it on my jacket and grabbed again. The chain glowed dull orange at one link and I thought, fine, let it. I was already losing skin places I couldn't afford to lose. That's the job. Decide what parts of you you'll be short of tomorrow. When the floor went, it went like a trap door. No drama, no thunder. A hatch opening into a cellar that shouldn't be under a cellar. The angel's grace pressed at me, a pressure that lived under the nails and in the gums and behind the eyes, and then lost leverage and then found none at all. It slid. They always open their eyes right then, and this one did. Blue like torch flame when a welder hits the hot point. The look it gave me wasn't hate. It wasn't love either. It was inventory. I was an object on a list it had just realized it would not get to complete. The chain bit my palms through the gloves. The links thunked across the rim of the hatch. The angel arched its back and the slag iron stuttered sparks like a train wheel hitting a quarter on the line. The space heater clicked itself off. The overhead bulb flickered. Somewhere upstairs, a cabinet banged open as if a hand had to let go of the knob. Then the seam swallowed it. The chain went slack in a breath that took a year. Silence, which is never silent after. There are always sounds you wish were silence. The heater kicked back on. My pulse let my ears go. Dust fell slower and slower, then hung in a kind of drift like it had to remember how gravity worked. I let the winch handle spin. The chain slopped against the floor. I sat down on cold concrete and waited to start shaking. I always shake after. If I pretend it's because the work was hard, not because the work was wrong, the shakes pass sooner. Upstairs, the kitchen sink ran a line the color of old tea when I rinsed. Grace residue comes off your skin like you've washed your hands in powdered sugar made of sparks. I held my fingers under the water until the sting changed from now to later. You get good at that calibration. The line between a pain you have to honor and a pain you can invoice to tomorrow. When the pipe thumped, I thought old house. When the curtain moved, I thought draft. When the hair lifted on my forearms, I thought failure. Someone was watching, but the street light threw the same dumb yellow it throws everywhere. No figure behind the sagging chain link, no reflection in the window. The fridge had been gone for years, but its scar was still on the linoleum, rectangle of floor cleaner than the life around it. I stood in that rectangle for no reason except superstition and watched the back door for a full minute. You think I was brave in basements? No, I'm just stubborn in one direction. I left with my bag. I locked the side door behind me, and then, when that ritual didn't count, I braced a shovel across the knob and a busted broom through the drawer pulls. I walked 2 blocks and sat on the steps of a Lutheran church because the city had run out of places that didn't look like they wanted company. The tremors came late this time. They started in my fingers and walked to my elbow and finally sat in my voice. I didn't let my voice do anything with them. When it gets bad, words fall apart in your mouth and you start sounding like a telephone pole in wind. I drank coffee from a gas station and didn't taste it. You don't drink coffee at 1 a.m. because of caffeine. You drink it because it makes your hands busy. My rented room was 2 neighborhoods away, above a check cashing place that closed with a gate as thick as a jail. I made it up the stairs one at a time because one at a time is how you get through most things you shouldn't have started. Lock stuck. I shouldered the door. The room smelled like cheap cleaner and neighbors' cigarettes and the kind of anonymity you can buy for cash. The feather was on the counter, not a burned husk, those you see during the work. Those hit concrete and go gray and crumble like they were never alive. This one was perfect. White that wasn't paint chip, white that wasn't bathroom tile. The white that makes your pupils squeeze because your brain thinks it might be dangerous. I didn't touch it. I stared at it long enough for the clock to be wrong. Then I slammed the cupboard door just to have a noise I chose. The cupboard slammed back. Something in the wall answered with a soft metallic sound like a cord dragged across wood. I locked the door. I wedged my chair under the knob. I pulled the curtain. The curtain didn't cover the edge of the window. I taped a trash bag over the gap. I could still feel the gap. Sleep comes for me like a debt collector. I pay in installments. I dozed in my boots with the chain coiled around my bag and the bag under my knees and the hook across my lap. Somewhere between the last bar of sleep and the first block of morning, I heard footsteps in the hall. Not landlord, not kid. The cadence was wrong, not the shuffle of someone who owed rent, not the bounce of a drunk who wanted to tell the world a truth he just found. Measured, purpose-built, the way a tape measure returns to its case. A fingernail brushed my door. No, not a fingernail, a wire, the scrape of filament. The lock clicked once just to test. Then the knob turned all the way until the chair wedged against the drywall squealed. Up, I told my legs, and my legs obeyed like they didn't like me. The window stuck. The second shove took the paint off the sill and a strip of skin off my palm. I went out into cold alley air that smelled like something had died on a Tuesday, and nobody had the heart to tell it this is a Sunday problem. Boots hit asphalt behind me, not running boots, not hurrying boots. Boots that knew how long the distance was and didn't change their mind about it. I didn't sprint. Sprinting makes noise you can hear for blocks. I trotted with my head low and my hook tucked, which is the city version of a prayer. The check cashing gate clattered somewhere below. A car alarm started and gave up because it wanted attention nobody had to spare. At the alley mouth I turned right because I always turn right unless there's a reason not to. Habit is a weapon you can use on yourself. I broke mine. I went left. A cat swore at me in a language we'd both forgot. The dumpster stank. The air had that thinness you get when winter is interested. When I looked back, I saw them for the first time. Wardens. If heaven has cops, these aren't them. Cops talk. Cops posture. Cops enjoy a little theater because theater keeps the audience out of the story. Wardens don't. Wardens move like a single decision walking around in boots. Their faces are wrong the way a store mannequin is wrong, human until the second you ask it to prove it. Porcelain pale like they were poured, not born. Eyes like coins left too long in a fountain. Glass needles in one hand, loops of humming cord in the other. The cord makes a noise you hear even with your hands over your ears. It's not loud, it's decisive. There were three. Of course there were three. If you send one and it dies, it might be an error. If you send two and they die, it might be a message. If you send three, it's routine. You're not the message. You're the chore. They took the alley without hurry because hurry is something humans invented to survive mistakes. They don't make those. They didn't shout. They didn't say stop. They let the cord sing close enough to raise hair through a jacket. That's how wardens give you their names. I kept moving. How did I ever drag an angel if three silent things with hardware made me feel like my bones wanted out of my body? It's the dumbest truth I know. The work takes a piece out of the part of you that notices fear. It does not take fear. It just makes a smaller bowl for it. When it spills fast. I cut through a loading dock. I threw my bag over a chain-link fence and hauled myself after it with a shoulder I'd derailed years back. The fence complained and then remembered it didn't have a vote. On the other side, I ran through a parking lot so empty it made me think of Sundays before the world got busy being broke. They didn't run. They shortened the angle. You can see it in the way their shoulders talk to each other from 20 yards apart. They're good at geometry. They're good at narrowing the future. The punching bag outside a boxing gym gave me a thought. I ripped the chain that held it, bell bronze, by the hue and the sound and slung the pad into the alley between us. It bought me a second. Wardens don't trip. They don't think about tripping either. But they'll route around an obstacle if it's the path of least resistance. For all their certainty, physics is their boss too. I made the corner. I made the street. I made the crosswalk and nearly made a taxi driver run over his own good sense. The honk that followed me into the next block would have read as die if you translated it wrong. I took it as a blessing. A horn is proof the world still contains people who think the noise matters. They didn't follow into the crowd. That's the other thing wardens do. They choose their witnesses. Tonight, I wasn't part of the demonstration. My ankle started telling the truth about my choices on the fence. My lungs started telling worse truths. I bent over a public trash can and did all the coughing a person can do without leaving their ribs where a city can find them. When the shakes came, they brought friends. My hands jackhammered. My teeth clicked. My eyes watered so bad I couldn't tell if the street lamps were failing. When they didn't step from the shadows, I learned a different kind of fear, the kind with patience. They had me measured now. They'd close when they were ready. The feather in my sink wasn't a threat. It was a calendar. I bought eggs on the way home because you're supposed to buy normal things after abnormal nights. I broke one in the bag because that's how eggs talk about gravity. Back in my room, the chair left a new bruise on the door and I let it. The white feather still sat on the counter where I hadn't left it. The yolk that leaked onto the carton looked like a small son wondering why the sky was kitchen tile. I didn't touch the feather. I lay on the bed with the chain under my knees and the hook across my lap, and I stared at the ceiling until the ceiling stared back. This is the work. Become the kind of person a ceiling can recognize. Sometime after the upstairs neighbor's television stopped selling knives and started selling salvation, I fell into a sleep shaped like a hole. I woke to a sound that would be nothing for anyone else and was everything for me. A soft scrape at wood, not the door, the window, the trash bag rucked. The tape sighed, the glass said yes in a way it shouldn't. I kept my breath thin. I let my eyes almost close because people who can see your eyes learn what you're thinking. The window latch moved just enough to count. The wardens didn't come through it. A feather did. Not dropped. Set. It spun once. It landed. It glowed like cold moonlight is supposed to glow but rarely does. It sat there and said, "You are on a list." It said it without words. It said it in feather. I didn't break. You break once and you never stop. I did what I always do. I whispered the work words into my chest where they stick best, and I reached for the chain. When the knock came at the door, it came as 3 polite taps. It came as a courtesy. The chair thumped. The hinges sighed. The lock learned about chords the hard way. I ran without dignity because dignity is end stage. I went out the window again because you can live with glass in your shoulder. You can't live with a needle in your heart. The alley welcomed me like it had been told to. I hit the ground wrong and my ankle said some things the city's sign code wouldn't allow. I got up anyway. I don't run to win. I run to buy minutes I can lick and stick to the inside of my jacket like coupons. At the mouth of the alley, I looked back. One warden peered over the sill like a realtor. Another slipped through the door without opening it wide enough to count as polite. The third stood where the feather sat and turned its head half an inch like a bird hearing something in the grass. They never talked. They didn't have to. The chain weighed my bag down like guilt. The hook knocked my thigh like a friend who should have gone home 3 hours ago. I went left again, then wrong, then right until I didn't know how many corners I'd bought. When I stopped, it was because the city stopped with me. The street was empty enough to ask big questions. I asked none. I watched the sky that couldn't care. I breathed like a theft. I waited for someone else to make the next argument because I was out. The coin came later. Another night, another factory. The burned church would be later still. The priest would be later and shorter than he deserved. The map under my skin would show itself in a motel mirror. The train, the fairground, the salt flat, all of that still ahead, like watching a storm roll across states on a weather map and pretending your porch is safe because the porch has always been there. Right then it was just me, an alley, a feather in a rented room, and 3 wardens who didn't need to hurry. The city exhaled. Somewhere, a siren chose a different block. I thought about my first job hauling a dead compressor from a dry cleaner's roof in July, sweating like the earth had a fever. I thought about my dad tightening lug nuts by feel and saying, "Son, work is just moving weight from the wrong place to the right one." He never said what to do when the weight moved back. I picked up the hook, and the night, the long, patient night, picked up me. I limp into the shadows of an abandoned plastics plant to buy an hour of quiet. When I switch off my flashlight, a light hums behind me anyway. No electricity, no switch, just a coin of cold brightness sitting on a catwalk I didn't climb. They started showing up like rent notices, quiet early where I couldn't pretend I hadn't seen them. The first one after the factory landed on the laminate counter beside the hot plate, pointed toward the sink as if that meant something. I didn't touch it. I cooked eggs I couldn't taste and ate standing up because chairs make you feel like the world owes you a seat. When I rinsed the pan, the feather turned just enough to keep the tip aimed at me. Noted. I told an empty room, which is a sentence that lets you pretend you're the one taking notes. The second showed the next morning. Same white, same too clean shine that isn't shine at all but a kind of refusal to be dirty. It rested on the microwave like it had come there to die neat. The tip pointed at the door. The third got ambitious. It lay in the doorway itself, like a place setting, angled toward the stairwell. It should have blown away the second I opened the door. It didn't. It clung to dust like it had instructions about gravity I don't get to read. I tried to rationalize. Drafts and coincidences live rent-free in any building this old. I taped off the window seams with blue painter's tape and shoved a towel under the door like a freshman trying not to let the R-ray smell his life. I set a cheap travel alarm for 5 a.m. and put a notepad by the sink, and when the alarm rang, I bleary-eyed my way to check if anything had come without my permission. It had. Fourth feather, kitchen table, tip angled to the left, toward the alley behind the building, toward the plastics plant. If you traced a straight line that crossed streets like streets are suggestions. I ate toast with no butter. I drew a little arrow on the notepad. I put it next to the feather and told myself if there was a pattern, it was mine now. By the sixth, I was done lying. They weren't pointing vaguely. They were pointing at places. My places. I printed a map at the check cashing place downstairs, the kind with gray streets that make a city look like a neutral idea. I laid it on the floor and arranged feathers tip first on each spot I'd worked the last 2 months. I had to think longer than I like to remember all the basements. If you learn to forget fast, it's easier to keep going. Forgetting is also how you lose yourself and don't notice the moment it happens. The feathers matched. Not exact. You can't get exact out of memory and copy paper and a city built on mistakes, but close enough to put a pressure behind my eyes. Each point formed a crude arc across 2 neighborhoods, curving south and west like someone had set string tack to tack through my sins. One feather sat apart, angled off the arc. A kitchen burned white. It aimed at a dot where I'd never worked. A vacant lot that used to be a laundromat before the city decided cars are a religion and parking is tithe. Funny, I said, because jokes are crowbars you can pry your brain with. You're telling me where I've been and where I'm going. I didn't ask for a tour. I bought a tiny camera off a guy who sells tiny cameras to people who prefer their stories short. Plastic, black, a lens like a thumbnail and a motion sensor that would false positive on a moth. I aimed it at my door. I set another on the counter pointed at the L of laminate where feathers like to pose. The hallway camera fed to my phone through a janky app that crashed as often as it swore it would not. Good. Unreliability makes you check twice. Checking twice keeps you alive. The 7th feather came at 7:11 a.m., as if a dead gambler liked symmetry. The app showed the hallway empty from 6:30 on. No landlord with a spare key. No neighbor with a vendetta about my boots. No one, the door never opened, the latch never clicked. I watched the video 3 times, 4, paused and scrubbed and zoomed until the pixels looked like confetti in a snow globe. Nothing. Inside footage, kitchen counter, 7:10:58 nothing. 7:10:59 nothing. 7:11:00 feather, stationary, present, tipped toward the fire escape window like a dog's nose pointed home. "You're cheating," I said, and it came out hoarse. I hadn't used my voice since midnight. The room felt occupied anyway. I didn't touch that one either. You learn quick what touches you back. At 7:11 the next day, the 8th fell through the vent. It didn't drift. It didn't flutter side to side like you see in commercials when they want to tell you a detergent is gentle. It dropped, straight, like a needle. The vent cover didn't move. The screws didn't twist. The feather slid between slats at a speed that said gravity but a precision that said hand. It clacked against the counter because it was heavier than a feather should be. I flinched hard enough to knock my coffee into the sink. The video caught it clean, clinical, complete. No prankster, no ladder, no fishing line. The ceiling had decided it owned my room and would be making deliveries. I unscrewed the vent cover with a butter knife because the landlord kept the real screwdriver somewhere no one has ever found since 1975. Cold air breathed on my wrists. I tilted my phone and aimed the flashlight. Up there, dust ducked, old gum, some genius stuck on a lip, a penny that predated me in feathers. Not a lot. Enough that when I rapped the duct with the knife, they shivered. I don't know what I expected. A nest, a shrine, a mouth. You can't explain to someone who sleeps well how often your expectations are a list of worst possible shapes. I put the cover back. I wrapped tape around the seams. I laughed because tape is how humans swear. Then I went to the laundromat that wasn't there. The lot was a square of gravel, more weeds than stone. A signpost with no sign. 2 concrete stumps where the bins had gone. The sky above it was a rectangle of indifferent winter. Nothing watched me unless you count a crow that didn't fly until I looked up, because birds know timing better than clocks. I stood in the middle until my boots found the old drain. You can tell by the way the gravel shifts that something used to be, even after the world gets tired of remembering. I kneeled. I pressed a feather tip against the ring of cement and felt a heat that didn't come from sun or effort. The feather hummed. Feathers shouldn't hum. This one did, gentle, like a refrigerator at 2 a.m. The note vibrated my teeth. I moved the tip around the circle and the pitch changed with position. A metal detector for sins I hadn't committed here. "This is a trick," I said, which is also a prayer if you say it hard enough. I set the feather down. I pulled chalk from my bag and marked 4 points around the ring where the hum was strongest. When you don't know how to proceed, make a square. It gives you corners you can defend. A woman walked her dog past the lot. The dog wanted a smell of me. The woman didn't. "They're going to build condos," she said to the air, not me. "It'll be nice." "Sure," I said to the dog. It sneezed in agreement because dogs don't owe developers hope. I left the square and walked the perimeter of a building that didn't exist. If you commit to pretending long enough, you get results. On the north side, a pair of rebar rods held dirt like bad sewing. On the west, a slab of cracked concrete too smooth to be natural. On the south, the weeds were laid down in one direction, as if something had brushed past in a long, slow hurry. I had dragged something here. Not an angel, not that burned sugar smell, something else. Something above my pay grade but still on my time sheet. The feather in my pocket pricked the fabric as if it wanted out to point harder. I let it. It tapped the air, turning until it settled to aim along Route 6. West. The arc on my map tilted a degree. Back in my room, I pinned the printed map to the wall because floor maps start to feel like you live on the ground. I taped each feather at its place and wrote the date in small letters because writing dates makes a thing less likely to be a nightmare you invented to have company. I connected the dots with threads scavenged from a sewing kit the last tenant left. The line curved like a careless smile. The ninth feather from the laundromat lot sat off the curve, tugging the smile into a grin that showed teeth. "All right," I said to whatever was listening behind the drywall. "I see you." At 7:11 the next morning, the hallway camera showed a shadow on the ceiling. Not a person, not a shape with weight or right to be. Just a dark that moved like fog does when heat believes in it. It passed over the door, paused, and the video glitched, one frame of static, then returned to showing a door that never opened. In the kitchen, the counter went from blank to feather between seconds again, tipped toward the map. I watched frame by frame. I took screenshots like that would help. I held my phone so long my hand cramped. When the app crashed, I set the phone down and let the shake finish. Not from fear this time, from recognition. They didn't need keys or hinges. They didn't need mass. They needed me to see the message. That's all. That's enough. So I did the thing I should have done on day 2. I tried to smash the language. I took all the feathers off the map and scattered them, under the bed, into the sink, between pages of a phone book I'd kept because I wanted proof the past once meant well. I took my boot and scuffed the chalk from the laundromat drain ring. I pulled the tape off the vent and threw it away. I turned the camera to face the wall and then I unplugged it because lies should be neat. I waited. The 10th feather fell while I was watching the hole where the camera had been. I heard it, no mistake, not imagination, the click of its striking counter, the whisper as it slid half an inch. I turned and there it was, bright as defiance, pointed not at a place but at my hand. "No," I said, because sometimes no is the smartest word a human has. I didn't pick it up. I swept it into a bowl with the side of a spoon like you'd move a bug you don't wish dead yet. I put a plate over the bowl. The feather tapped once, twice, and stilled. I tried to sleep. The ceiling did its creature breathing. The hallway exhaled drafts stamped with 100 other people's years. My elbow ached where I'd crawled a catwalk. My ankle ached for reasons I was tired of naming. The map on the wall hummed in the absence like a refrigerator I couldn't unplug. At 2 a.m., I got up and wrote down the places in order, from 1st to 10th, with dates and rough times. Basements mostly, and one storage locker like a coffin made of chain link, and a church so burned it remembered itself as smoke more than stone. I drew a rough curve by hand so I wouldn't be beholden to thread. I marked the laundromat lot with an X. I marked the plastics plant with a circle because that was where the catwalk had rolled coins into the future I hadn't met yet. I'd never kept a ledger. The chain is my accounting and itch is my receipt. But if the feathers wanted me to look like a bookkeeper, I'd balance the page. In the morning, I woke already angry, which is a fuel but a dirty one. I made coffee you could float a nail in and drank it black. The 11th feather didn't wait for 7:11. It fell at 7:06 like a kid jumping the gun at field day. It spun once on the map like a compass needle drunk on north, and then it laid down, tip pointed at a stretch of warehouses near the river, places where water makes promises we know it won't keep. "Fine," I said. "Let's see what you want me to see." The warehouse on 12th belonged to nobody and everybody. The chain on the side door was there for show. The padlock was rust in hollow shape. Inside smelled like rope and mice and 10,000 pallets that had carried 10,000 things that didn't matter anymore. Light came in through a run of high windows thick with grime. Dust hung midair like stage fog that couldn't afford tickets. The feather in my pocket warmed until my hip hurt. It liked this place. Usually when something heaven touched likes a place I don't. Contradiction is the color of my job. I walked rows until I found the mark. A scuff of soot across concrete, a square where something heavy had pressed when it wasn't supposed to. Drag scars, not mine. These curved too smooth. These didn't come from hands or winch or stubbornness. These had floated and then remembered gravity too late. I crouched. I put the feather tip to the soot, and it hummed the way a cicada does in August when you remember time isn't kind. The hum vibrated up my arm into the old, broken places. I closed my eyes and saw shapes behind my eyelids the way you see a bulb after you look too long. Circles nested inside circles. Lines that met and didn't intersect. The picture of a plan that hates you, rendered in geometry so clean you want to smash it with something soft just to break the lines. I opened my eyes because I don't like what lives between blinks. Who dragged here? I asked the air, which is a question for ghosts and idiots. The air answered with a breath colder than river water. I knew the smell under it, hospital, disinfectant, and grief. It came from above, high catwalk. I didn't want to look up. I did anyway. Coin, cold bright, sitting where I hadn't climbed. The one from the plastics plant's catwalk had looked like a quarter glazed in moonlight. This one was the same coin, the same coin, the same coin. My head insisted on the repetition because repetition is how you file panic until you have drawers again. It lay on the grated walkway like someone's grandma had emptied a swear jar there. It hummed into the skylight. It made the dust above it calm. "I'm not touching you," I said, and my voice bounced back wrong off the far wall. "I'm not carrying you. Carrying heaven's scrap is how men wind up thinking they've been deputized." The feather in my hand twitched. It aimed at the catwalk rail and then at the door and then at me, indecisive for once. That scared me more than certainty had. Even omens like to be right. I left. I didn't run. I got into running's face and told it to wait for when it mattered more. Back in the room, I pushed the landlord's table against the map wall so I could sit and pretend I was the one doing the looking. I added 12th Street to the ledger. I underlined it twice because underlining is how humans set fire without matches. I circled the laundromat X again. When I stepped back, the curve began to make a shape that only made sense if you knew skins you can't see from above. The way rivers used to flow before we told them where to go. The way electric lines choose shortest paths with consequences. The way bodies sleep around wounds. It wasn't pointing toward a place as much as it was pointing toward an idea. I took a breath. I let it out slow. I said the work words, quiet, just enough to make the chain under the bed twitch like a dog dreaming. The room didn't like hearing them. The feathers did. They rustled on the wall and lay flatter, pinned by meaning. The 12th feather waited until I was looking at the camera feed. The hallway was empty again, a cheap carpet, a soda stain from a decade ago. A door the landlord painted a shade of white only landlords know. The seconds flashed in the corner like they were proud to show up in order. I felt the thing before the thing was a thing, a pressure in the sinuses that says weather or math. The feather didn't drop. It lengthened. It grew from nothing to a tip in the frame like a line being drawn. Straight down from the vent, yes, but not falling. As if someone were pushing it through a seam in the air, careful, slow, with their tongue out in concentration. It stopped exactly half an inch above the counter and then let itself go. It angled toward the map, made its own space between two others like an extra rib. The hallway feed never changed. I didn't swear because I wanted to save my breath for something useful. I set the phone face down. I set my hands on the table. I felt my pulse in the wood. I said okay to me and to whatever was learning how often I say okay. I pulled thread between those last 3 points and the line stopped pretending to be a line. Curve became arc. Arc became partial circle. The center, if you drew it, landed off the map, west, out past the county line where the old dry lakes live, a place I knew without knowing, a dead basin tourists drive past and call a view. Of course, I said, you want me in the open. I took a long shower because you fight heat with water and fear with ritual. I cut the tape around the vent and retaped it neat. I picked up the bowl and took the plate off, and the feather inside had turned gray chalky. It fell apart when I touched it, ash on my fingers. The other feathers on the wall didn't change. Alive as things like that get to be, I cleaned up. I boiled water and made noodles. I ate standing. When the tremor came back, I let it walk through me like bad radio. I didn't fight it. Fighting turns tremors into company. At 6:59, I set the phone to record both feeds, hallway and kitchen, and I sat in the one chair, facing the map like it was a window, and I was waiting for weather. 7:01, 7:05, the air felt thinner. My ears popped like the building had changed altitude. I had the old miner's superstition that something under me was digging. The knock came soft. 3 polite taps, same rhythm as before, same message. The handle didn't turn. The door didn't bulge. The taps didn't ask permission. They told on me. I didn't move. The vent cover flexed the tiniest apartment inch. The screws didn't spin. The metal didn't warp. Just a child's breath of bow. On the phone screen, the hallway stayed the same. On the kitchen screen, the counter gained a feather between frames. It aimed not west, not at the laundromat lot, not at the river warehouses. It pointed at me. Not my hand this time, my chest, where the chain sits in sleep and the work words live when you go quiet. You can argue with a lot of things, physics, people, the rent. You can't argue with a story when it decides you're its subject. I stood up slowly. I put both palms on the table like you do when you're getting hired or fired and pretend the choice is a surprise. I said because it needed saying, no inheritance, not mine to give. I didn't know who I was telling, the Wardens, the map, the part of me that wanted to quit by making someone else begin. The feather didn't move. It didn't care about my lines in the sand. So I took my marker and I drew a circle around the center the arc wanted, out past the map's edge. I labeled it in block letters, not yet. I underlined it 3 times. I taped the marker to the wall like a stake driven into something that can't be staked. The room breathed again. The vent cover relaxed. The hall camera flickered once and came back the same. I almost believed for the width of a human breath that I'd set a boundary that mattered. That's when the ceiling sagged a fraction, enough that plaster dust snowed down, and a feather dropped point first into the middle of my table, burying itself a 1/4 inch in the wood without splintering it. Not a fall, not a place, a command. The app didn't catch anything but the moment it appeared. The hallway camera showed nothing but door and carpet, and the polite absence of witnesses. The feather quivered upright in the wood like a tiny white stake. The second it stops vibrating, something thin sings on the other side of my door. The Warden's filament testing the knob. Not to come in, not yet, just to make sure I understand the order of operations. Map, command, compliance. The feather in the table points west. The filament hums. And the coins, wherever they've been waiting, start to sing back. The plastics plant had been dead since the 90s, but death doesn't mean vacant. It just means no one left bothers to own it on paper. You can tell from the fence. Barbed wire curled lazy, gaps where scavengers cut for copper, graffiti that doesn't even bother being creative. Just letters big enough to scare the next tagger into picking another wall. Inside, the air smelled like melted toys, or maybe memory had baked that in. The feathers wanted me west. The ledger on my wall agreed. The stake of white lodged in my table made the command official. So I obeyed, not because they owned me, but because ignoring heaven's handwriting gets you a visit from Wardens, and I wasn't stocked for another round. The factory floor yawned 4 stories high, skylights busted but still trying. Catwalks latticed overhead, yellow paint flaking, rails bent by storms or vandals or maybe just rust's persistence. I walked under them slow. My boots broke glass bottles and startled pigeons. The feathers in my jacket pocket warmed like they wanted to be closer to sky. My chain weighed opposite, heavy, dragging my shoulder lower like it had opinions about balance. That's when I saw it. Coin. Cold bright, same size as before, sitting on the catwalk grading 40 feet up. No reason it should glow when the sun was already slanting through the roof. But it glowed anyway, not brighter, just steadier. The kind of light you trust without knowing why, and therefore the kind that kills. I told myself not to climb. I climbed anyway. The ladder rattled like it was trying to throw me off. My ankle barked from old sins, ribs flared where scars remember before you do. Halfway up, the air thickened, not smoke, not dust, pressure, like walking into a thunderstorm that forgot to bring rain. At the top, the coin lay where I'd seen it. Humming, low, a note that bent my teeth. I reached with the hook instead of my hand because I still like being alive. The hook's iron tip touched the edge, and the whole catwalk lit like a bug zapper. The hum turned into a chord, layered voices pressed into metal. My ears rang, my balance went. I gripped the rail hard, chain rattling. Sparks spit under my boots, not hot, just wrong. And from the shadows on the far side, 3 wardens stepped out. They don't hurry. They don't have to. One carried cord looped on both hands, humming like a hive. Another had a glass blade as long as my arm. The third carried nothing, until it raised its palm and a needle slid out from under the skin like it had always lived there. The catwalk shivered under their weight, but not enough. Not the way it should with 3 bodies. Their steps were math, not motion. Not here, I muttered, because talking is sometimes all you get. Not yet. The coin pulsed. The wardens spread. The hum rattled the bolts on the railing. I did what I always do when I'm outnumbered. I made gravity my ally. I hooked the coin, yanked it off the grate, and shoved it into my jacket without looking. The hum followed me down like a song you can't shake. The wardens advanced fast now, not running, not sprinting, but faster than math should allow. I dropped, 40 feet, steel floor. My ankle screamed, ribs collapsed inward, chain clanged against concrete. Pain isn't the enemy, it's the receipt. I rolled, came up with hook in hand, and backed toward a row of stacked pallets. The wardens flowed down ladders and beams like water that remembers gravity late. They didn't fall. They didn't break rhythm. The coin burned against my ribs. When they hit the floor, the one with the blade moved first, fast, too fast. My hook caught the flat, sparks without fire. My hands vibrated to the bone. The cord whipped next, humming through the air. It grazed my jacket and the fabric curled black instantly like paper held to a candle. I ducked. I shoved. I dragged one into the pallet stack. Wood splintered, dust filled the air. For a second, just a second, I saw their faces up close. Smooth coin eyes, flat, no hate, no joy, only assignment. That's when the coin in my jacket flared. White burst, not bright, not like light bulbs or lightning. This was subtraction, every shadow swallowed, every crack of dark eaten. The wardens froze for half a breath, and half a breath is enough if you know how to spend it. I swung the hook low, caught the cord wielder's legs, the slag iron bit where nothing else should. It hissed. It actually staggered, one knee collapsing. The other two moved to flank, but the coin pulsed again, harder this time, rattling the windows in their frames. The wardens shuddered, not hurt, just interrupted, like chess pieces paused mid-square. I didn't wait. I ran, through pallets, through dust, through rusted doors, out into sunlight too gray to matter. I didn't stop until I was across the rail yard, lungs burning, hook dripping with blood that wasn't mine, wasn't human, wasn't anything you could name. In the alley behind the plant, I braced myself against a brick wall and dragged the coin out of my jacket. It didn't burn the skin, but my fingers shook like they'd been holding an electric fence. Closer now, I saw what I hadn't before, etchings. Not random, not scratches. Words. Work words. Same guttural syllables I mutter under breath when I split a floor. They wrapped the coin in a spiral, too small to read without bleeding eyes, too precise to be carved by hand. It hummed like it wanted me to speak them out loud. "No," I said, and shoved it back in the pocket. From the factory roof, a window shattered without touch. A shadow slid across brick that didn't match any sun. The wardens weren't finished. They never are. So I limped into the city again, hook clutched, coin humming, feathers waiting back at the room to tell me where I'd sin next. That night when I tried to sleep, the coin didn't stay quiet in the drawer. It rolled on its own. Once, twice, 3 times before settling flat. When I turned on the lamp, the etchings glowed faint blue. And on the wall above my bed, 4 fresh scratches marked plaster. Not words, not symbols, just strokes, curved, deliberate, like someone counting. You don't pick motels because they are safe. You pick them because they're cheap enough to vanish in. This one was 2 towns down Route 6, neon sign buzzing like it had emphysema, half the letters gone. Motel was all it managed. The office smelled like bleach and burned coffee. A clerk slid me a brass key with a number stamped so deep it cut through the tarnish. He didn't look up. That's why you come to places like this. Nobody cares if you check in bleeding. The room had a mattress older than me, cigarette burns on the carpet, a television that coughed static louder than the shows. Perfect. I locked the door, shoved the dresser in front of it, and sat on the bed with the chain across my lap. The coin hummed from the nightstand drawer like a hive pressed in metal. The feathers in my bag rustled every time the AC kicked on, even when the vent was taped. That's when the scars started itching. They don't heal right. They don't fade. They write themselves deeper every time you drag, like a tally carved in ribs. Tonight they pulsed under the skin like worms learning to spell. I pulled off my shirt. Old scars, long, pale, thick, crossed newer ones, raw and angry. The last pull had split tissue I thought was done tearing. It wept down my side like candle wax. I reached for the kit, gauze, tape. A bottle of cheap liquor to pour over the wounds because pharmacies don't sell absolution. My hand shook. Tremors again, the kind that make you drop things. I tightened my fist until the shake went internal. Then I saw the knife. Not mine, not from the kit. Lying on the sink counter like housekeeping had left me a gift. Long, kitchen style, handle wrapped in twine instead of plastic. Blade shimmered faint, dull blue, same shade I'd seen on the warden's cords. I didn't touch it at first, I just stared because staring is free. The blade hummed low, not like the coin, different, angrier. When I finally lifted it, the twine cut into my palm, too tight, too deliberate. The blade felt wrong in weight, heavy where it should have been balanced, light where it should have been steady. I angled it toward the scars. The blue shimmer brightened, my skin crawled, then it cut me without moving. A thin line split across my forearm, blood rising slow. I hadn't pressed, I hadn't swung, just holding it near was enough. I dropped it. The blade landed flat, silent, but the blood kept welling. That's when I realized it wasn't meant for them, it was meant for me. At 2 a.m., the tremors woke me, not mine, floor tremors, the kind when someone walks too carefully. The dresser against the door didn't move, but the knob twisted slow, not forcing, testing. A soft scrape followed, the sound of filament wire dragged against wood. I grabbed the hook. The chain coiled around my wrist like it wanted to go first. My eyes flicked to the knife. It had slid 2 inches closer to the bed. I whispered the work words. The room didn't like it. The walls pulsed with mildew stains, darkening like bruises. The chain rattled against itself. Then the knock came, 3 polite taps, same rhythm as always. I didn't answer. Answering is suicide. The silence after wasn't silence, it was listening. When dawn bled gray through the blinds, I checked the wall above the bed. 4 scratches from last night had become 5, curved, deliberate, counting. I taped gauze over the fresh cut on my arm, but the bleeding didn't stop. The shimmer lingered under the skin, blue veins glowing faint, crawling toward my elbow. The knife was back on the counter, clean, dry, waiting. I wrapped it in a towel, shoved it deep in my bag, and left the motel before the clerk had brewed new coffee. Outside, the air smelled like copper, not rain, not rust. Grace burning somewhere near. The feathers in my bag quivered. One slipped out the zipper, white and sharp, and pointed down the road before the wind snatched it flat. West again. Always west. On the bus out of town, I unzipped the bag to check the coin. Instead, I found the knife lying on top of everything, towel gone, twine handle sticky with my blood. The coin was gone, and in the window reflection behind my shoulder, I swore I saw a face, smooth, coin eyes staring, though the seat behind me was empty. The road west narrowed into nothing. Paved lines turned to gravel, gravel into dirt, dirt into dust. That's where I found it, a church that had been burned so long ago the air still remembered the smoke. White paint peeled into gray strips. The bell tower cracked through the middle, leaning like a drunk refusing to fall. Pews were gone, stolen, rotted, who knows. Roof sagged low, shingles curled like dead leaves. Inside, the walls were scorched black, cross still nailed crooked to the front, stubborn in ruin. Perfect, a place already invisible, a place nobody would miss if the ground swallowed it whole. I needed that. You don't walk into a fight with wardens expecting to win. You walk in hoping to write the last sentence yourself, so I prepared. I dragged broken pew fragments into choke points, stacked them like barricades. Salt lines along thresholds, windowsills, floor cracks. Chalk sigils across door frames. Some wards worked better against demons than wardens, but I wasn't in a position to be picky. I ripped rusted pipes loose, sharpened ends against concrete, scattered them across the aisles like steel teeth. Bell shards I'd scavenged from the fallen tower I strung across rafters, tied with twine to clink and shriek when disturbed. The chain I coiled near the pulpit. The hook leaned against my leg while I worked. The knife, I wrapped it in cloth, wedged it under a beam, because I didn't trust it near my skin anymore. When I was finished, the church looked less like a house of God and more like a trap built by something too tired to care about blasphemy. And I was ready, as ready as I could be. It came just before sunset, the silence. Not empty silence, silence that steals, crickets gone, wind gone, even the rafters held their breath. I crouched behind the pulpit, hook in hand, rebar in the other. My body shook not from fear, but from collapse waiting for its cue. The first chord brushed the threshold. The sigils hissed white-hot, then died. That's how I knew they'd stepped inside. 3 of them, always 3, moving smooth down the aisles, boots crunching glass soft, never careless, just confident. I waited until the middle one crossed into my line. Then I rose and swung. The hook cracked against its skull. The face snapped aside with a sound like splitting wood. It staggered but didn't fall. Blank coin eyes turned back to me, needle lifting slow, deliberate. I drove the rebar forward with everything left in me. It punched through lower ribs, resistance, then a yielding crunch. The thing spasmed, physics, not pain. The needle slammed down into the pulpit, wood splitting, smoking. The church filled with sparks that weren't fire. The other 2 closed fast. One whipped a cord at my legs. I dropped, rolled. The hum seared the air where I'd been, hair on my arms burning. I slashed the hook wide, drove them back through dust and shadow. Then luck. One warden stepped onto a pile of glass I'd scattered. It slipped just a fraction, but enough. I lunged, buried the hook deep into its jawline, yanked sideways. Flesh tore, black smoke hissed, eyes flashed white. The body collapsed, twitching, burning from the inside out, not fire, ember trails racing under skin. It crumbled to ash too fine to track and left something behind, a coin, glowing faint, white, pulsing like a heartbeat. Not relief, realization, they could die. The surviving 2 pressed harder, faster, movements tighter, more efficient. They'd learned from the mistake. I forced one into a choke point I'd built from pew fragments, shoved a beam I'd rigged half loose. It collapsed, pinning its arm. I smashed rebar down until its head folded wrong. Smoke screamed free. Second body burned, second coin left glowing on the tile. The last warden came harder, cord slashing wild enough to rattle the crooked cross loose on the wall. We collided in the aisle. Cord wrapped my arm, burned deep. I screamed, swung with the opposite hand, hook connected with its jaw. I ripped the cord free, skin tearing, then I drove the hook into its eye until it burst. The body convulsed, dissolved. Third coin, all 3 lay glowing on the broken floorboards. And that's when the church itself seemed to shiver. The coins didn't fade, they brightened together. Light pooled until the rafters glowed. Dust floated white as snow. The air hummed like wires strung too tight. A signal, a flare, a beacon. Not a victory, an invitation. My chest heaved so hard I thought my ribs might split. Sweat dripped into my mouth, tasted like iron and ash. I staggered between the coins, jaw slack, hook trembling in my hand. I hadn't won anything. I'd rung a bell, and something was coming to answer. The church stank of iron and smoke long after the wardens burned away. But outside, on the horizon, the sky tore in a silent flash of white. Lightning with no thunder. Clouds sagged like they were being pulled down by invisible hands. The coins glowed brighter, and I realized killing them wasn't the end. It was the start. You don't go looking for priests in daylight. The good ones don't talk. The bad ones don't last. The only ones worth finding live in the cracks. I found mine behind a shuttered repair shop back room lit by one bulb choking on dust. His collar was long gone, replaced by a whiskey-stained undershirt and a beard yellowed by cigarettes. He smelled like incense left too close to fire. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped, not looking up from the bottle. "That makes two of us," I said, dropping heavy into a chair that creaked like it wanted to quit. The chain at my feet rattled against the concrete. His eyes flicked to it once. Recognition, not surprise. He poured amber into a chipped glass, pushed it across. His hand shook worse than mine. I didn't drink. I needed a clear tongue. "What do you know about this?" I asked, nudging the chain with my boot. He laughed without humor, coughed. "Enough to tell you it doesn't belong to you, never did, never will. Then why won't it let me go?" He looked at me for the first time. His eyes were hollow but sharp, like he'd seen angels' guts spill and never let the sight leave. "Because you're marked," he said. "Heaven branded you, hell tolerates you. Neither side lets go, you're the scale, nothing more." I felt the scars under my shirt itch like they were listening. "How do I cut free?" I demanded. He swirled the whiskey, sipped slow, flinched like the burn reminded him of every exorcism he failed. "You don't," he said finally. "There are only two ways: pass it to another, or die with it wound tight around your soul." My breath stalled. "Pass it." He nodded once. "That's the preferred way. Heaven likes continuity. The work must go on. Balance maintained. The chain has to have a carrier." "I'm not handing this to anyone," I snapped. The chair bit into my back as I leaned forward. "Better I rot than chain someone else." He studied me, pity maybe contempt. "Then you'll die running." The silence stretched heavy. The scars under my ribs buzzed like hornets in meat. I gritted my teeth until my jaw popped. "Good," I muttered. "Better me than anyone else." He didn't argue, just poured again, slower this time, like he wanted to remember what it felt like to believe in choices. "You know they'll come," he said, voice lower now, almost confessional. "Not angels, not demons, the Wardens, specialists, sent for you when the balance trembles." "They've already come," I said. "3 of them burned in a church last night." He went pale. His hand trembled so bad the glass chipped against the table. "You killed them," I nodded. "Then you've signed your own death. They don't stop now, they escalate." I wanted to laugh, but it came out bitter. "They already don't stop." That's when the door screeched open. First one stepped through, coin eyes gleaming under flicker light. Cord in hand, humming faint like a storm caught in a bottle. The priest lurched to his feet, roaring words I didn't know, half prayer, half curse. The air twisted with each syllable. The warden froze mid-step, form wavering like heat haze. He had power once, I saw it. Words thick enough to choke heaven, but more followed. 2, 3, too many. The second rammed a glass blade through his chest before the last curse left his throat. He collapsed hard, blood running black across the floor. His eyes rolled toward me, wide, desperate, seeing fast. He gasped like he had one more word, one more truth, but nothing came. "Gone." "No," I shouted, hook screaming free of my bag. I slammed it into the throat of the nearest warden. It staggered, hissed, but didn't fall. The others moved smooth, silent, circling. I barreled through them wild, ripping cords with blind swings, smashing bottles on shelves, sparks and glass flying. Flames caught fast, old rags, wood soaked in whiskey. The whole shop roared within minutes. Heat and smoke wrapped us all. The wardens walked steady through it, unbothered, but fire doesn't care who it feeds. I crawled blind, choked, shoved myself through a back door as the roof began to cave. I hit the alley coughing black, hands blistered, skin raw, my ribs seared with every gasp. Behind me the shop collapsed in fire and ash. The priest's body burned with it. No grave, no name, just smoke swallowed by night. Another life erased for being near me, another truth lost with him. I staggered down the alley, alone again. Worse than alone, empty. because now I knew the chain never ends, not unless I damn someone else, and that choice was never mine to make. As I limped into the dark, the coin in my pocket hummed louder, not faint anymore, not hidden, loud enough that shadows in the alley started to turn their heads, and I realized the beacon wasn't done ringing. I left the burning shop behind me, lungs raw, eyes stinging, ribs buzzing like they'd been soldered. The city was no longer an option, too many alleys, too many shadows waiting to house wardens. So I drifted west until pavement turned to dirt, until gas stations gave way to grain silos rusting at their seams, until the world spread wide enough that I could see trouble coming before it touched me. That's when I found the farm. Two-story house, paint peeling into gray sheets, porch sagging. But lights glowed in the kitchen window, warm and steady. The smell of bread drifted on the air, honest bread, not the factory kind. I didn't plan to stop. I never planned to stop, but hunger bends your rules, and the beacon in my pocket hummed like it wanted me here. The man who opened the door looked like he'd been carved out of work. Hands cracked, shoulders heavy from seasons behind a plow. He studied me once, saw the scars, the burned jacket, the eyes that had forgotten rest, and stepped aside without asking questions. His wife set a plate in front of me before I had words ready. Mashed potatoes, bread thick enough to fight back. The kind of meal you don't earn anymore. I ate like I hadn't eaten in weeks. Maybe I hadn't. Then the daughter came in. 17, maybe 18. Hair tied back, hands flour-dusted. She stopped cold when she saw the coins I'd set on the table. "You shouldn't have those," she whispered. The room went quiet. Even the house seemed to lean in. She sat across from me, eyes locked on the coins like they were grenades. "Where did you get them?" I didn't answer right away. Sometimes silence buys more than words. "They burn," she said, voice lower. "They hum when you dream. My brother had them once." Her father shifted uncomfortably but didn't speak. She went on, "He carried the chain before you, not long, just long enough. When it broke him, he tried to pass it to me." Her hands trembled as she spoke. I refused. "He died with it still wound tight. I thought it ended, but now you're here with the coins." My chest tightened, scars itched under the shirt. I realized what she was telling me. The chain doesn't just choose, it recycles. "Your brother," I rasped. "He dragged," she cut in, eyes wet. I smelled it, the burning sugar, the silence after. I never forgot. The coins between us glowed faintly, as if agreeing. She reached for one. I slammed my hand down first. "Don't," I snapped. She froze. I realized too late I'd scared her. "I won't take it," she whispered. "I swear, but if the wardens come, we fight. That's the pact. You helped us eat, we help you stand." Her father nodded once, a man's way of signing a contract without ink. I wanted to tell them to run, to scatter, to forget me before my shadow burned into their fields. But the chain hummed at my feet, heavy as gravity. Some debts you don't get to refuse, so I nodded back. "Then we fight." It began near midnight. The wheat outside rustled too steady for wind. The crickets fell silent. The air bent in on itself. I stepped onto the porch with the hook in hand, coins rattling like teeth in my pocket. That's when I saw them, not in the fields, around them. Wardens, dozens maybe, too many to count in the dark. Their cords stretched from stalk to stalk, glowing faint blue, singing like wire pulled tight. The sound made the wheat bend low, bowing in unison, as if the land itself were kneeling. The daughter stood behind me, face pale in the porch light, her voice cracked like glass. "They're here for the coins." The cords hummed louder. The wheat bent flatter. The wardens closed in, patient as ever, silent as death. The first cord brushed the porch rail. It hissed. Wood curled black. I gripped the hook, scars burning, chain rattling at my feet. In the field, more blue lights flared, dozens of wardens tightening the circle, singing their wire song, making the earth bow. We were boxed, outnumbered, trapped in grain that now bent like prayer mats, and the coins in my pocket pulsed in rhythm with their hum, like a beacon answering back. The farm didn't last. Places that offer kindness never do. The wardens sang their wires around the fields until the wheat bowed flat. I fought, burned, bled, but in the end only distance kept me alive. When dawn came, I was a shadow limping down a gravel road with smoke still clinging to my clothes. The family was gone. Whether fled or fallen, I didn't let myself check. Some debts can't be paid back. At the tracks outside town, I hid in weeds until the freight rolled past. Iron wheels screaming, 100 cars long carrying lumber, chemicals, whatever the country still pretended it needed. I caught a ladder, hauled myself onto the empty flatbed, and lay there until the wind burned my face dry. West again, always west. He found me 2 nights later. Old man, boots laced with twine, lantern swaying. He walked the rails like a priest walks an aisle, head bowed, lips moving, never missing a tie. At first I thought he was another warden wearing skin, but wardens don't stumble when ballast shifts. Wardens don't cough. "Rough cargo tonight," he said without looking up. I froze. My hand went to the hook at my side. Then he spoke the words, not English, not Latin, not anything a human throat should know. The work words, the same guttural syllables I mutter when I split a floor. My scars burned hearing them from another mouth. "Where did you learn that?" I asked, voice hoarse. He lifted his lantern. His eyes were pale, cataracts cloudy but not coin-dead, still human. "Soldier taught me, summer of '68. Came back from the jungle with scars that hummed like yours, couldn't keep his hands still, said the words kept the balance." My breath caught proof. The chain wasn't new. I wasn't the first. We walked the ties together. He recited in rhythm with the rails, each word snapping sparks off the steel. "He told me it ain't about heaven or hell," the trackwalker muttered. "Said it's about weight. Tilt too far one way, the world tips. Someone's gotta drag ballast back down." I clenched my jaw, same lie I'd been fed, same story dressed as duty. "Where is he now?" I asked. The old man tapped his temple. "Still hear him some nights when the lantern burns low." I didn't press. Some ghosts answer questions, some don't. At a siding, we paused while another freight howled past. The trackwalker turned to me, lantern shaking. "You carry it now," he said, not a question. "It doesn't end, they just pass the line." I wanted to deny it, to spit it back, but the scars under my shirt throbbed, the chain at my side rattled, and the coins in my pocket hummed like they were agreeing. "How long?" I whispered. He gave a smile full of pity. "As long as men believe in balance, as long as someone thinks dragging keeps the sky steady." The lantern sputtered. For a second his face looked carved from wax, melting. Then the flame steadied. "You'll know when the ledger closes," he said. "Not before." The freight we rode groaned into motion again, carrying us west. I found an open boxcar and climbed in, chain heavy across my lap. The trackwalker stayed on the ties, lantern bobbing smaller and smaller until night swallowed him whole. I thought I'd earned quiet, for one stretch of rail at least, but quiet doesn't last. The roof above me creaked, slow, measured, not wind, not steel shifting. Boots. Deliberate, certain. Wardens. Dust rained down from the rafters of the moving car as the steps paced above me. The coins in my pocket hummed louder. The chain coiled like a dog sensing its master. And I realized this train wasn't carrying me away. It was delivering me. To them, hospitals are the worst places to hide. Too much light, too many eyes, too many smells layered like old wallpaper, bleach, blood, cafeteria grease, perfume meant to mask despair. But broken men don't get to choose where they collapse. I limped through the sliding doors just before dawn, ankle swollen, ribs screaming, scars buzzing under my shirt like they were remembering work before I did. I told the front desk it was an accident, nothing big, and let them triage me into a plastic chair that smelled like it had collected 1,000 other secrets. That's when I felt it, Grace. Not warm, not kind, bitter. A draft of burnt sugar in the vents. There was an angel here, and if I smelled it, the wardens already knew. They parked me in a hallway near ICU, thin curtain between me and machines that breathed louder than the patients. A nurse bustled past, hands full of syringes, eyes sunken from nights longer than mine. I saw the angel before she did. It was tethered above the bed of a child no older than 6. Not physical, half there, half reflection, a figure bending light wrong, wings coiled like broken blinds. It wasn't blessing the child, it was watching, waiting. Grace leaked from its feathers, pooling thick enough to choke. The monitors glitched, numbers flickering, alarms hiccuping in confusion. The nurse paused, hand hovering over the boy's Roman 4. She didn't see the angel, but her skin prickled like she did. My scars flared. The chain rattled under my jacket. I knew what came next. If I didn't drag it now, the warden would. And wardens don't care what gets chewed up in the process. I slipped behind the curtain, pressed chalk into the floor tiles fast, muttering work words through clenched teeth. The air bent as the seam split under the bed. The nurse gasped as her pen rolled off the tray and landed on the floor. Only it didn't stop. It fell through. Her eyes widened, but she couldn't speak. The angel turned, coin blue eyes narrowing on me. Grace lashed. My chest seized like I'd swallowed fire. I hurled the chain. It wrapped wings and wrists, slag iron sizzling. The child whimpered but kept breathing. The machine kept rhythm. I pulled. Muscles shredded, bones grinding, tendons screaming. The angel resisted without moving. Pressure under my skin, wordless accusation in every language I didn't know. Another inch. Another cough of smoke. The pit widened, swallowing the bed's shadow, whispering ash into the room. The nurse backed against the wall, tears in her eyes. She saw something, even if she couldn't name it. I forced one last pull. The angel broke, dragged down, screaming soundless into the seam. The pit snapped shut. Silence collapsed around us. The boy's monitor leveled, breathing steady. Normal, saved. The nurse whispered, "What are you?" I didn't answer. You never answer. I staggered out into the hall, chest burning, arm trembling like it didn't belong to me. That's when I saw him, tall, calm, pushing a cart stacked with linens. White scrubs, ID badge that didn't flicker under the lights, too perfect, a night orderly, but his eyes, coins sunk too deep into sockets. No light, no blood, just task, a warden. He pushed the cart past me without speaking, without even slowing, but the humming followed, the faint vibration of a cord hidden under the sheets. The hallway stretched too long, the air thickened. My hand tightened on the hook. Then, overhead, the alarm blared, code blue. The sound stabbed through walls, through bone. Doors burst open, nurses rushing, doctors shouting. And the warden turned, not toward me, but toward the cry room down the hall, where infants slept. The alarm wailed. Red lights pulsed. The warden walked silent, deliberate, toward the door marked neonatal. Cord uncoiled from the cart, humming like a lullaby made for killing. I ran after him, scars screaming, hook ready, knowing if I hesitated, Heaven's hunter would cut through innocence to get to me. I didn't sleep after the hospital. Couldn't. The image of that warden, coin eyes blank, cord humming like it was already around the cribs, kept my ribs buzzing long after the alarms faded. I'd stopped him, but barely. Nurses thought the chaos was a short circuit. I knew better. By dawn, I was gone. City to freight yard to boxcar, west again. Always west. The coins in my pocket glowed faint in rhythm with the tracks. Not brighter, just steadier, like they were pleased I was still moving. That's how I ended up at the foundry. The building squatted outside a dead steel town. Letters half fallen from the sign still spelled Harker, Bell, and Iron. Windows busted, pigeons nesting in rafters, soot baked so deep into brick you'd never scrub it clean. Inside, the air smelled like rusted hymns, like sermons carved in metal. Bells lay cracked on the floor, mouths gaping like broken teeth. The chain at my side rattled harder. It liked this place. I knew why. Bells were cast for heaven once, every one of them tuned to prayer, and slag iron, the kind I use, was poured here too. Heaven's ore, hell's leftovers, balance baked into steel. This was where my chain had been born. I followed the scorch marks until I found the old furnace. Stone mouth gaping, ash heaped black, crucibles rusted to their racks. No fire, no coal, no fuel left, but the scars under my ribs buzzed like the place wasn't finished. I laid the chain across the anvil. Its links were cracked, edges jagged from years of drags. Each scar on me had a twin in that iron. I raised the hook high, slammed it down like a hammer. Sparks spat, but not red. White, cold, the kind that blinds more than burns. The chain sang, low, groaning like a hymn hummed through rusted lungs. Each strike pulled the sound higher. Not harmony, not discord. Something older, something the metal remembered. It had been forged to call heaven. It had been reforged to serve hell. And now it was being beaten into something else, something only I could name. As I struck, words leaked from my mouth, not mine. The work words bent into melody. My throat bled with each syllable, but the furnace walls thrummed back, repeating. The bells on the floor vibrated. Shards of bronze rang faint, discordant, like choirs gone hoarse. And then, without warning, the furnace flared. No coal, no wood, no spark I'd struck. Flame, blue-white, hotter than any fire I'd stood near, poured out of the stone mouth, licking the ceiling, hungry. The chain glowed red, then white, then blue. I staggered back, shielding my face. From inside the fire, a voice spoke. Not loud, not shouted, but in every tone at once. Child, soldier, preacher, woman, man, angel, demon, all laid over each other like echoes in a canyon. You are not the first link, it said. You will not be the last. The furnace groaned. The flames bent higher, a tower of blue light. And when the last link breaks, the balance falls. I fell to one knee, breath ragged, sweat streaming. My scars split open, bleeding through my shirt. The chain hissed on the anvil like it was alive. I wanted to scream at the voice, to ask why me, to beg for an end, but begging is wasted breath. Instead I whispered, then let it fall. The flames roared as if mocking. The furnace coughed, not smoke, not ash, coins. Dozens, maybe hundreds, spilling from the fire mouth. White-hot, glowing, ringing as they struck the floor. Each one hummed the same note. Together they made a chorus. Not warning, not threat. A summons. And from the rafters above, boots hit steel. More than one pair. The wardens had heard the song. And they were coming down into the foundry. Boots hit the catwalks first. Iron screeching, dust raining from rafters. Then shadows stretched across the bell mouths on the floor. 3 wardens, no 5, moving smooth, splitting like water finds cracks. The coins I'd spilled from the furnace glowed hotter, ringing faint, their hum vibrating up my bones. The chain on the anvil pulsed, blue-white, alive. They didn't hurry. They never hurry. They knew the summons had cornered me. The flames in the furnace bent sideways, as if bowing toward them. When the first warden stepped onto the foundry floor, the bells began to ring, not struck, not touched. Their cracked bronze throats shuddered on their own, coughing out sound that shouldn't have been sound, low at first, then rising like a choir warming up. Each note scraped my ribs raw. Each note made the coins on the floor flare brighter. The wardens paused, just for a breath. Then they moved again, coin eyes locked on me. The bells sang louder. It wasn't a hymn. It wasn't a warning, it was command, and the wardens obeyed it. The first lunged, cord whipping. I swung the reforged chain. Blue fire raced the links. The slag iron struck cord and didn't just burn it, it split it. The warden staggered. For the first time I saw it falter. I yanked again. The chain screamed like molten steel bending, and the warden collapsed, black smoke pouring from its coin eyes. A shard of light bled free, coin falling to the floor to join the others. The bells rang louder in triumph. The other four advanced. Blades, cords, needle hands, I met them all. Every swing of the reforged chain left blue scars across the foundry floor. Sparks spat, not red but silver, each one cutting the air like glass. A blade met my hook, shattered in half. A cord wrapped my arm, burned through itself, searing the warden holding it. The needle sank into my shoulder until the chain coiled, dragged the warden into the furnace flames. The bells screamed louder. The whole building shook like lungs too full of sound. One by one they fell, ash collapsing, coins ringing as they struck stone. 5 coins, 10, 15, the pile grew, and the song grew with it. By the time the last warden dissolved, I was kneeling on the floor, body shaking, arm bleeding, scars lit like coals. The chain glowed bright enough to hurt my own eyes. The bells didn't stop. They rang harder, faster, not random, a rhythm, like a warning. The coins on the floor began to move, not scattered, not random, sliding slow across stone, circling each other, forming a shape older than prayer. A circle, a seal, a door. My scars crawled, my breath caught. They weren't warning me, they were summoning something else. The last bell cracked down the middle, spilling dust. The furnace roared higher without fuel. The coins lifted off the floor, spinning, glowing white. And through the light I saw a hand, not angel, not demon, something larger, something older. It reached out of the circle, grasping for me. And the bells sang one final word in the work language. Continue. I left the foundry at dawn, chain wrapped twice around my torso, coins still humming faint inside my pack. The bells had cracked themselves to silence, but their echoes stayed in my head, pulsing behind the scars. West again. Always west. Highway stretched empty, asphalt split by weeds, sky wide and pitiless. Each mile carried me further from smoke but closer to something older. I could feel it dragging inside my bones, like the road itself leaned downhill and I was the only one sliding. The hand that had reached from the coin circle at the foundry still haunted me. I could almost hear its nails scraping the air when I closed my eyes. By the third day I wasn't alone anymore. At a truck stop outside Amarillo, I sat hunched over burned coffee when 2 drivers froze mid-conversation. Their eyes locked on the window. I turned. A warden stood under the sodium lights, coin eyes blank, cord uncoiling across the pavement. But this time it wasn't just me who saw. One driver swore, dropping his cup. The other whispered, "What the hell is that thing?" The warden didn't move toward them. It moved toward me, always toward me. But the trucker's terror told me something had changed. The veil was thinning. The work that used to stay hidden was bleeding into the world. I dragged the chain out, hook clanging, and the drivers stumbled back. The warden's cord hissed, but the reforged links burned through it in a single strike. The body crumbled, ash scattering across the lot, and the coin it left behind rang against the asphalt, loud enough for everyone to hear. The drivers ran. No one would believe them, but they'd try. And that was worse. 2 nights later, I caught a ride west with a drifter in a busted sedan. He didn't ask questions, most don't. But at midnight, he started humming under his breath. A tune I knew. The work words. I snapped my head toward him. He went pale. "I don't know where I learned it," he said fast. "Just been in my head since I was a kid. My old man used to say it kept nightmares off." My scars throbbed. My chest felt heavy. Generations, not just me. Not just the soldier in '68. The chain had bled into lullabies, into road songs, into the background noise of America itself. That's why the wardens never stop. They don't just hunt me. They hunt anyone who might know. Somewhere past the New Mexico line, I stopped to piss by the roadside. Empty desert stretched forever, cacti bent like old men praying. That's when it started. The chain moved on its own. At first a tug, then a yank, then a force strong enough to drag my boots across the gravel. I didn't open a pit, I hadn't even whispered the words, but the earth split anyway, cracks racing across the asphalt, dust rising in plumes. A seam gaped, black and hungry, humming the same rhythm the bells had sung. The chain pulled harder, into the pit. I braced, heels carving furrows, arms locked. "No," I hissed through teeth. "Not yet." The scars lit like fire. The reforged links burned blue-white, hot enough to sear my palms. My ribs felt like they were splitting in half. The seam widened. I saw light inside, not flame, not shadow, something worse. A glimpse of the hand again, reaching, patient. The drag stopped as sudden as it started. The seam snapped shut, cracks sealing like nothing had ever broken. I collapsed on the road, chest heaving, hands blistered raw from holding the chain. In the distance, headlights approached, a convoy of trucks. Their horns blared, not warning but answering, and I realized with cold certainty. The chain wasn't waiting for me to open pits anymore. It was opening them on its own. The headlights swallowed me where I knelt on the cracked asphalt. Diesel engines roared, horns split the night. A dozen trucks at least, chrome flaring under the moon, trailers rattling like bones in cages. The lead rig braked hard, tires shrieking, gravel spraying. Door slammed open. A man climbed down, wide shoulders, beard like steel wool, eyes hollow but awake. "You're him," he said, no question. The chain rattled at my side. My scars buzzed in answer. They pulled me into their convoy. Not gently, not cruelly, just inevitability. I sat in the cab of the lead rig while the road peeled away beneath us. Every driver had the look. Scarred hands, tremors in the wrists, eyes that had seen wardens and lived to keep driving. "We've all seen them," the bearded one muttered, keeping his eyes on the highway. "Some tried to call 'em angels, some thought they were ghosts. We know better now." Another voice crackled over the CB. "You smell it too, don't you? That burnt sugar stink when they're close." I did, always. My stomach turned hearing strangers name it out loud. At a rest stop, they spread a tarp across a hood, not paper, canvas stitched with trucker patches, road signs, scraps of denim. On it, white feathers were pinned, not scorched gray like mine. White, clean. each one angled, deliberate, pointing, forming lines, a map, the same arc I'd been tracking in my ledger, the same curve west, only bigger, wider, stretching farther than I dared trace. "We follow where they fall," one woman said, her knuckles raw on a thermos. "Every town, every mile marker, they point us the same way." I stared at the canvas, bale rising. The pattern was clear now, not just my drag sites. A web spreading across states, pulling all of us toward the same dead center. The bearded driver leaned close. "We've lost people. Every season. One steps out, don't come back. Wardens take 'em, or the pits do." His eyes flicked to the chain coiled around my torso. "But you carry it proper, you make 'em burn." I wanted to laugh, to spit the truth. That carrying it isn't strength, it's a sentence. But their faces were lit by the hum of truck stop fluorescents, desperate, exhausted, clinging to the idea that maybe I was the one thing between them and the wire song of Wardens. So I said nothing. And silence can be worse than a lie. We rolled out again near midnight. Convoy stretched across the interstate like a spine of steel. Engines groaned. Horns called back and forth. For a while I let myself believe in the rhythm, in the fellowship, in the idea that maybe I wasn't running alone anymore. Then the road shifted, not cracked, not potholes, shifted like something beneath it rolled in its sleep. The lead rig swerved, trailer fishtailing, tires screaming. The bearded driver yanked the wheel, but it was already too late. The asphalt ahead of us sagged, split, opened wide. A pit. Not mine, not theirs, something else's. The convoy's lead rig jackknifed. Metal shrieked, headlights spun wild, trailer tipping toward the black mouth that yawned across the highway. I clutched the hook, chain rattling, scars flaring hot enough to blind. Because this wasn't just another drag. This was the road itself tearing open. And it wanted to swallow every last one of us. The rig screamed as steel twisted, headlights painting wild arcs across blacktop. The ground split wide, an asphalt mouth gaping, swallowing the painted lines whole. Drivers shouted over the CB, voices ragged, engines redlined. Some swerved clear, some didn't. Trailers jackknifed, cargo spilling in sparks. The highway wasn't road anymore. It was prey dragged down screaming. And we were next. I staggered out of the cab, chain coiled tight, hook heavy in my hand. The pit wasn't like the seams I opened. Those were slits, surgical, ugly but controlled. This thing, it was wide, raw, alive. The air reeked of copper and rot, heat radiating upward like a furnace vented through asphalt. And it wasn't empty, something moved inside. At first I thought it was shadow. Then it rose, taller than the trailers, unfolding slow, a warden, but bigger than any I'd ever seen. Its limbs were cords braided into bone, knives jutting like ribs, eyes sunk, coins the size of headlights. When it stood, the earth shuddered like it was bearing weight it wasn't built for. The other wardens had always been hunters. This one was a judge, and it had crawled out for me. The truckers fought anyway. One rig jerked sideways, slamming its trailer into the creature's leg. Metal crumpled. The warden staggered but did not fall. Another driver hurled a flare, the red light spinning down into the pit. The thing's skin rippled, cords thrumming in response. Their courage didn't matter, not against this. It swung its arm wide. A cord licked across 3 trailers at once, peeling them open like tin. Cargo exploded across the asphalt, grain sacks, engine parts, steel beams scattering like toys. The CB crackled with screams before it cut to static. My scars lit raw under the shirt, buzzing like hornets in blood. The reforged chain burned white-blue in my grip. I swung it hard, Lynx screaming, hook blazing as it struck the creature's limb. For a second, impossibly, the slag iron bit deep. The warden roared, first time I'd ever heard one make sound. Not voice, not language, just pressure like thunder tearing bone. The chain rattled on its own, coiling tighter, humming. Then it yanked. Not at the warden, at me. My boots skidded across asphalt, gravel cutting skin, arms nearly torn from sockets. The chain dragged me forward toward the pit. I planted my heels, snarled through teeth, tried to let go. Couldn't. The lynx bit into my flesh, fused to scars that already glowed white hot. The reforged iron wasn't just my weapon anymore. It had become a leash, and the pit was its master. The giant warden loomed above, cords whipping, coins burning bright enough to blind. Behind me the convoy screamed, horns blaring, engines wailing, men shouting prayers older than roads. But none of it mattered. The chain was pulling me in, not to fight, not to balance, to join. The chain won. My boots lost grip, my ribs screamed, and I tumbled into the pit as the convoy's horns howled above me. There was no bottom, just descent. Ash and heat rose past me, but not from fire, more like breath, ancient, patient, waiting for me to land. When I hit, it wasn't stone, it wasn't soil, it was metal, a floor that hummed, alive under my palms. I staggered upright. The scars on my chest burned, responding to whatever beat inside this place. It wasn't a cavern, it wasn't hell, it was an engine. Black gears bigger than houses churned in silence, no sound but vibration in the bone. Pistons drove down into nothing. Belts of slag iron teeth rotated in rhythms too precise for chance. And overhead chains, miles of them, all tangled, dragging invisible weights downward, each link glowing with scars etched in human flesh. The judgment engine, balance made into machine. The coins in my pocket leapt free, clattering across the metal floor. They spun into grooves already cut, snapping into place like gears finding teeth. The whole structure trembled. Then I saw it, walls lined with seats. Not angels, not demons, people. Flesh burned to shadows, faces empty, but human bones fused into the machine's framework. Each one strapped in, a chain running from ribs down into the floor. Carriers, everyone before me, and they weren't gone, they were working. Their tremors kept the gears alive. It came again everywhere at once, child, soldier, priest, woman, man, not separate but blended like all those strapped-in voices had merged into one. You thought you dragged for heaven, you thought you dragged for hell, but you dragged for us. The gears slammed once, the vibration knocking me to my knees. The balance is not divine, it is design. It was built, and it must be fed. The floor split. A pillar rose, glowing white-hot, etched with the same spiral symbols I'd seen carved into coins. It reached for me. The reforged chain lashed around my torso, locking me in place. I fought, screaming, pulling, but the links bit deeper, fusing with my scars. The pillar pressed into my chest. The pain wasn't pain, it was rewriting. Flesh boiled, ribs sang. My vision flared blue-white until I thought my eyes had split. When it pulled back, the scars across my chest had changed. Not lines anymore, symbols, precise, spiral, a brand. Not just proof of labor, proof of ownership. I collapsed against the metal floor, chest smoking, chain seared into me like it had always belonged there. The gears around me churned faster. Sparks fell from chains overhead. And above, high at the rim of the pit, I heard the horns of the convoy again, still blaring but weaker, fainter. Because the pit wasn't closing this time. It was growing. The brand burned steady across my ribs, not fading, not cooling. It pulsed like a second heart, keeping time with the gears of the engine. The chain was no longer something I carried, it carried me. Every tremor in its links rattled my bones. Every hum in its slag iron whispered work words I didn't want to understand but now knew by instinct. I was the last link, the final piece in a design that stretched back through centuries, maybe longer. And if I did nothing, I'd run the gears until my body rotted into the frame, my tremors powering the balance for the next poor bastard. That wasn't an ending. That was a surrender, so I made a choice. The engine rose around me, endless chains grinding in their sockets, pistons pounding like judgment hammers. The strapped-in carriers twitched in unison, empty eyes staring without seeing. I stumbled through them, hook dragging sparks on the metal floor, scars bleeding through the brand. The coins in the groove spun faster, glowing white. Each one sang, a high-pitched shriek that burrowed under my teeth. The engine was accelerating. "Continue," the voice commanded. "No," I rasped, my throat bled with the word. I wound the reforged chain tight around my arms. Every link sang in protest, white-blue light pouring from the cracks. Then I hurled it into the gears. The slag iron links didn't snap, they fused. The gears shrieked as they seized, teeth cracking, pistons slamming out of rhythm, sparks cascaded like burning snow. The strapped-in carriers convulsed, their bodies rattling against the frame. Their empty mouths opened not in pain but in relief. "You cannot stop," the voice roared, shattering like glass under weight. "The balance must be kept." "Then let it collapse," I whispered and pulled. The chain ripped the gears apart. The engine buckled inward. Metal screamed, chains whipped wild, coins exploded into shards of light. The pit walls split wider, chunks of asphalt and rebar falling into the furnace glow. Above, I heard the convoy horns again, long panicked blasts echoing across a sky that was breaking open. The road trembled, the horizon splitting in jagged seams. The balance wasn't faltering, it was ending, and I was dragging it down with me. The brand seared brighter, splitting flesh from bone. My body convulsed, vision drowning in white. But the scars, the old scars, the ones left by every angel I'd pulled, flared too. Not in pain, in defiance. They sang louder than the brand, louder than the chain, louder than the engine itself. I drove the hook into the floor and pulled with everything left in me. The engine tore apart, chains snapped, carriers burned away into ash, the voice cut to silence, and the pit sealed, not slow, not gentle, but violently, like the earth itself was slamming shut. The last thing I saw was sky, not bright, not dark, empty, indifferent. The last thing I felt was heat pouring through me, claiming the body it had chewed for years. And under all of it, one clear thought. Dragging was never about survival, never about winning. It was about being chosen to carry a weight no one should. But weights can fall, chains can break. I was the last link, and I dragged the balance down with me. Hin letter 1E A3NH thumbnail. Dark cinematic horror digital painting of a fallen angel chained deep inside a hellish abyss. The angel has torn black wings, a glowing red halo cracked and dripping blood, and chains binding its arms to jagged rocks. Above, a pale cold light shines down like from heaven, contrasting with the darkness below. Red blood streaks drip from the cavern walls, and flocks of black crows and shadowy creatures circle overhead. The atmosphere is eerie, nightmarish, and oppressive, with detailed shadows, fog, and chilling ambience. Ultra-detailed, horror movie poster style, no text, no logos. Terrifying horror digital painting of a fallen angel imprisoned in a cavern of blood and fire. The angel's black wings are torn and soaked in dripping blood. A broken, glowing red halo cracks above its head, and rusted chains pierce through its flesh into jagged rocks. Streams of blood cascade from the cavern walls, forming pools on the ground. In the shadows, distorted demonic shapes crawl closer, their eyes glowing faintly. The atmosphere is grotesque, violent, ultra-detailed, like a nightmarish painting, no text, no watermark. Eerie cinematic illustration of a chained, fallen angel standing at the bottom of a vast abyss. Its shadowy black wings dissolve into smoke, while a halo of red fire hovers broken above its head, radiating ghostly light. The chains binding it glow faintly with runes stretching into the darkness. From above, pale divine light shines down, but it cannot reach fully. The abyss is filled with swirling mist, shadowy silhouettes, and ghostly faces screaming from the stone walls. The mood is haunting, surreal, and otherworldly, ultra-detailed, no text, no logos.